Aloha, this is Jason from Hawaii. Welcome to a special edition of the Comics for Fun and Profit podcast. In this episode, I will be interviewing Frank Barbiere and Arris Quinones, writers and co-creators of Astonishing Times. It is an exclusive digital 5-part comic series from Variant Comics and Comixology Originals. Now, issue 1 comes out on July 27th. It is 34 pages for $2.99. Now, before we begin the interview, I'm just going to give brief history of Frank and Arris. So Frank, as everyone knows, is a comic book writer. He's been in business for a long time. He's written many comics for various publishers. I'm going to name a few: The Revisionist from Aftershock Comics, Black Market, Broken World from Boom Studios, Solar, Man of the Atom from Dynamite, New Avengers, Avengers World, Howling Commandos of S.H.I.E.L.D., Monster Squad for Marvel. And I love that, Frank. I love that one. Howling Commandos.
Oh, thank you so much.
That was fun. That was a fun miniseries. Global, Supergirl, Sinestro for DC. He's written for Vertigo Quarterly, SFX, Blackout for Dark Horse, Five Ghosts, and Violent Love from Image Comics that came out in 2020. And also Frank has also worked with other publishers around the world, such as, and I'm going to try to pronounce this French publisher's name as best I can, Gallant Comics, is that correct?
I think it's Glenat. Glenat? I cannot speak French, nor do I pretend to, but I think I've heard someone say Glenat. Because I think I said Glenat, like the East Coaster I am once. Someone was like, no, it's Glenat.
Okay, but the main thing is that you've worked with different publishers around the world, not in just the US, and that's really great. So
thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, that makes me sound very busy. But I did write full-time freelance for, oh gosh, it was almost probably around 7 or 8 years. But yeah, I was lucky enough to break in at Image with Five Ghosts back in 2013. Mm-hmm. I had kind of just been, she went to college to be an English teacher and got my master's in English ed. And I always wanted to be a writer and was always writing, like taking writing classes and really just trying to learn how to break in. And after college, I happened to live, I grew up in New Jersey, and I lived actually a town over from the Joe Kubert Art School.
Oh, yes.
And I had started like kind of like messing around a little bit with doing my own comics in college and just finding artists online. But when I moved back home after college, I was like, oh, wait, there's this school right over here. Like, I should look for students who go there. And I found Chris Mooneyham, who was the artist and co-creator on Five Ghosts. And we became friends and started talking. And after I was 2 years out of college, we just kept working and managed to stumble upon Five Ghosts. And once that got published, it was just like the floodgates open. We were very thankful that it was very well received and just have been rolling from there. And now I actually split my time. About 4 years ago, I want to say, I started working in the video game industry as well. I wrote a little bit on Destiny 2, but now I work full-time at Airship Syndicate, which is a company actually founded by Joe Madureira. I work directly with Joe, which is a huge thrill for me. It's so strange to just think of him as Joe now, as I grew up loving his art. And again, it's been a little bit since I've put a comic out, so I'm really excited to be bringing Astonishing Times out. It's my first book back, I think, in about 2 or so years, maybe more. And again, could not be more excited to bring it out. But yeah, I love comics. I love working everywhere. I like Marvel. I like DC. I like indie books, and it's just been a pleasure to put whatever I can out and have an audience read it.
That's so cool, Frank. Thank you very much. And then Arris, I'm going to go over your history. You're the host and co-creator of the very successful Variant Comics YouTube channel that started in May 2012. You have, now you can correct me if I'm wrong, the last I heard is that it has 2 million subscribers, and your subscribers, you refer to them as the Variant Nation.
Yes.
And you have about maybe 6 million plus monthly viewers. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's our average.
Okay. And then you're rated #1 by WatchMojo.com back in May of 2017, and #10 by CBR.com in October of last year. You and your co-host and producer Tim Connolly started the Variant the podcast that started on August 2019. Also to Arris, you're now in your when I was doing some research was that you're an actor on Revision 3 that's on Discovery Digital Network. And mhm.
Yeah, Revision 3. So Revision 3 / Discovery Digital, that's the original online platform that picked up Variant.
Okay.
So I guess I've done a little bit of acting in short films, but I guess that's just the internet making it sound cooler than it is.
No, but it's pretty awesome. It's like wow, man, you've done you and Frank have done a lot, so that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I also want to touch on one thing, Arris, is that while doing some of the research, I listened to one of your podcasts, and
Right.
it's like, and I've seen the one of the YouTube episodes promoting Astonishing Times, and what I really love about it is that your positivity, it's just your passion, your positivity, just literally overflowing, through the episode. It's very contagious, and I know this sounds a little corny, but the episode and even the podcast, it sounds pretty clean, like like young teens could watch it without any fear of a swear word or how some of how some of these podcasts can be
Yeah.
rated R type. Yeah. So before I continue on, did I miss anything for you, Frank? Either you guys, did I miss covering anything? Or
for me, that's pretty much that's the gist of it. I don't know. What about you, Frank?
Me too. Like I said, makes me sound busier than I am.
Yeah.
So I'll take it.
All right. Now, before we move on, I want to give a big shout out to Pamela Horvath. So Pamela, I'm sorry, I'm hoping I'm pronouncing your last name correctly. Pamela is a publicity director of Superfan Promotions. So Pamela, mahalo, thank you in Hawaiian for arranging this interview. Do you guys want to add anything to that?
Well, she's awesome. She's been handling a lot of our PR, and she's been great. Her and all of Superfan and all those people over there, they're really great to work with. So if anyone gets the chance, definitely work with them.
Yes, thank you so much to Pamela and Superfan. They've been incredible.
Yes, so Pamela, thank you very much. Okay, so I'm gonna start out. So either one of you guys, whoever wants to go first, where can listeners follow you guys on social media?
I guess I'll lead off, Frank. Do you want to lead off?
Go for it, yeah.
All right. So for my personal account on Twitter is Arris_Quinones. You can follow me on Twitter there. My Instagram is ArrisQ. And then if you want to follow everything Variant, it's on Instagram, it's Variant_official. And on Twitter, it's Variant Comics. We love Twitter and Instagram. We have some TikToks. We have a TikTok account and stuff like that, but we're not as active on that. I'm kind of OG with the Instagram and the Twitter. I really like those. And we have a Facebook as well, so Variant Comics on Facebook.
Okay. And what about you, Frank?
And I do tend to use my Twitter pretty frequently to announce stuff and sometimes just be goofy and dive into stuff, talk to a lot of other people I know. It's at Atlas Incognita, ATLASINCOGNITA, which was my very original self-publishing brand way back in 2008. And I wish it was just my name, not that, but there we go. And then I the same thing, atlasincognita.com. I haven't updated it in a long time, but it is a fancy website I made at some point. Maybe I'll get to it at this point. Get back to it.
All right, so where did you guys grow up?
Arris, if you want to just take stuff first for now, that's totally fine. We can keep that cadence as to not interrupt each other.
All right. So I was born in Long Island, New York, Brentwood to be exact, and I lived there until I was around 4 years old. My dad was a retired New York police officer, NYPD. So he actually got injured on the job. He didn't get shot or anything like that. He was in a squad car, and he got rammed from behind by a truck, and it threw out his back. So it forced him into early retirement. So From there, retiring, me having a 4-year-old, he's like, I want to go to Florida. Let's go to Florida. Let's go to Disney World. So we moved to Florida, and then that's where I really grew up. So I grew up in Margate/Coral Springs, Florida. Went to high school there. Basically, I lived there till I was 23. Got married there, and then after 1 year of being married, moved to Texas, and I've been in Texas for coming up on 10 years now. Dallas, Texas. Yeah, and that's kind of my childhood and stuff. As far as like the comic background to that, which I'm sure is what everyone's interested in. My dad was I wouldn't say big fan. He was like a kind of like a more casual fan, but he loved like superheroes and stuff like that, and he was a collector at nature. So like if he saw things that interest him, he would like have to have all of it, whether that be coins, comic books, statues, whatever it may be. But what really hit for me, what got me into comics, anyone who watches Variant knows, it was Batman the Animated Series and the 1989 Tim Burton Batman film. So I was born in 87. So I watched the 89 Batman film in syndication once, it was on TV around like 93, 94, which is around the same time Batman the Animated Series came out. And I was like, what is this awesomeness? This is the coolest thing ever, The Dark Knight, and to this day, especially, both those things, but definitely Batman the Animated Series for a lot of people, especially Batman fans, is like the gold standard for Batman in general, right? Yeah. Like, especially now that all of us 8, 10, 12-year-olds are in their 30s, we're like, yeah, no, that is our Batman. That was the Batman from 92, right? So that from there, that was kind of the golden age, I feel like, of Saturday morning superhero cartoons, because we also got like X-Men the Animated Series, Spider-Man the Animated Series, the whole animated series, Fantastic Four. That's when all that stuff came out in the early to mid 90s, and I was like, these cartoons are awesome, but you're telling me they come from comic books? I need to find the comic book. So that got me into comic books. My dad would do a lot of work and stuff at Barnes and Nobles back in the time, and they had like the Masterworks back to the Marvel Masterworks, the collections,
and when they were very affordable, right?
Right. Yeah. Exactly. So it's funny, even though I say it all the time, but even though I'm a 90s kid, so technically my Green Lantern should be Jon Stewart, my Flash should be Wally West.
Yes.
I grew up reading a lot of the back issues and like Omnibus and stuff like that. So I'm still all about Barry Allen. I'm still all about Hal Jordan. Those are I love Wally West and all that stuff. But I was introduced to the OG Green Lantern and Flash and all that stuff. So that's what kind of got me into comic books from there, because I'm like, oh, these comic books are awesome, and there's more of it. There's an unlimited amount of it.
There's so much more.
Right, it's dropping every month. You get new stories consistently. A lot of kids that helped me learn to read and make me want to read, and it just kind of skyrocketed from there. I just always loved comic books, became a good fan, and then flash forward all the way up to I guess the creation of Variant. My brother-in-law had a very successful DIY filmmaking channel called Film Riot, which is still one of the biggest film channels on YouTube, with coming close to 2 million subscribers as well. And it was even successful back then. He's like, hey man, I like comic books not as much as you, but I would like to co-create something. Would you be willing to host the show and co-create, come up with the show with me? And I'm like, I'm down, because at the time I was like a warehouse supervisor for Tyco Electronics and Security in Boca Raton, Florida. I'm like, yeah, no, I'll definitely do it. And this was around 2008. So when the first Iron Man came out, and what a lot of people don't know is we were shooting pilots and stuff for the show for 3 years, pretty much almost 4 years, reworking it, doing behind the scenes, because the first episode of Variant didn't hit until 2012, which is the same year and actually month, because it was May of 2012, that the first Avengers movie came out, which is really cool. So we hit kind of when the iron was hot, and with doing because the channel basically became a kind of a school for comic books. If you don't know a lot about these characters, but you want to know all of Iron Man's history in 10 minutes, I'll give you all the highlights, you know what I mean, in 10 minutes and stuff. And with the MCU just developing at that time and really coming into its own, and then obviously exploding in the following years, a lot of casual fans were like, hey, I like the Hulk, hey, I like Thor, I want to know more about them. And they would search on Google and to find I did Variant did a history of Thor and stuff like that, and it was an easy entry point. And then one of the things I learned earlier on, because I'm like, what would I want if I didn't know a lot about comic books, was to do reading recommendations. So at the end of every history episode, let's say we're talking about Black Widow, because the movie just came out recently, at the end it would be here are 5 to 7 like must read Black Widow storylines, and that would give the audience something to be like, oh, I'm gonna go to my comic book store, I'm gonna go to Amazon and buy that trade. So I think people really resonated with that. And then from there, you know, it kind of, thankfully, it kind of blew up from there. People really dug it. We did versus episodes, alternate versions episodes, anything. As the tagline of the show is, we talk about all things comics, whether it's TV shows, video games, movies, you know, action figures, collectibles, anything and everything that is comic book or superhero related. And, you know, because of us getting in early, we're commonly referred to as the godfather of comic book YouTube channels, which is an honor and really cool. But yeah, and here we are years later, making a comic book.
Yes. And there's one question I'm going to ask you guys. Actually, Arris, I'm going to ask you about. But so, okay, what about you, Frank? Where did you grow up?
So I grew up in New Jersey and lived there for quite a while. I'm just a tiny bit older than Arris, but from Jersey, I moved to New York City, and I love New York City, and was there when it was still kind of like the lifeblood with DC and Marvel both there. I was fortunate enough to go to both their offices while they were still there. And then I kind of bounced all over after transitioning to freelance, because New York is super expensive and not the most supportive place for freelance writing. I actually worked for Comixology a little bit early on. That's how I met everyone over there, and I'm so glad to still be involved with them when I can and have their support, as they're all great people, and I got to know them personally while they were still kind of building up, and have always been a fan and just amazed by their passion. But and as I said, I went to school to be a teacher. I grew up playing music in bands a lot, and just traveling as much as I could, like touring. And after I moved to New York, I really just decided, like, hey, I want to try to make writing happen full time. Like, how can I do this? And was so fortunate and in the right time, right place with so many things. And again, very much like Arris, I grew up in that strike zone of having the Batman animated show, which I loved, the X-Men animated show, and also just in the 90s. And Arris, I'm curious if it was like this in Florida too, but like where I was, like, you could throw a rock and hit 20 comic book stores.
Oh, for sure.
It was the 90s. It was the boom. And like, I didn't realize at the time that it wasn't always like that, obviously, but there was a comic store in our local mall. And whenever my mom would like go shopping or something, she would leave me, and I have a twin brother who I'm very close with. She would leave us in the comic book store, and we were just always kind of surrounded by it, and just thought it was a thing. And when I got to high school, I remember that's when I found really my main LCS that was a little further, because shops had started to close, unfortunately. But I had a very supportive store called New World Manga, which is still there in, oh my gosh, not East Hanover. This is so embarrassing that I can't remember New Jersey, where I lived for 27 years. But oh my gosh, I'll look at it. Livingston, excuse me, yes, Livingston, New Jersey. And again, I would go there every week after school, after I got back from teaching. And really, like, it's where I discovered like image books and things like that. And outside of Marvel and DC, just other, like, every major book I bought and really cared about, I ended up buying at that store. So again, I bought Watchmen there when I was like 17, and like things like that. And like, just again, way after the fact, obviously, but it is where I discovered everything, and really near and dear to my heart. The one, the mall, has long since been closed, but and Jason, I apologize if I'm jumping all over to other questions, but the first thing I really remember reading is I actually have an extreme fondness for the series X-Men 2099, because that is the first book I read monthly as a kid. Like, I just bought every issue of it monthly, and it taught me, hey, comics come out every month, and you can always be there. And then also, like, hey, creative teams change, hey, things happen. And but I have all of them in a like binder somewhere at my parents' house. And again, I have such a fondness for that story, and it makes me so envious that like so much is collected in trade now. I mean, virtually everything. And then also with digital, you can get stuff, because back then, like, sometimes you could just miss a book, and if you didn't catch it, you didn't catch it. And the other big book that I really loved, that I guess was probably around like 15 when it came out, was Joe Kelly's run on Deadpool. Like, when Marvel did that launch, I think Kazar was part of it, and like Maverick was part of it. Whatever that launch was called in Deadpool, it was Joe Kelly and Ed McGuinness. I love that Deadpool book. And it went on for like 100+ issues, and lots of different people ended up writing it, but it was Joe and Ed McGuinness who brought me into it. And I just have such a fondness for that run. And I loved how funny it was. I loved Ed McGuinness's art. And that was another one that I was comic shops were a little harder to find at that time, and I was just driving all over. But and also, oh gosh, I can go on forever. Like then, like when J. Michael Straczynski's run started and the Grant Morrison X-Men started, like I was shopping at New World Manga at that time. But like I just loved weekly comics so much. I still do, but like I was in New York City, Forbidden Planet, I would go to all the time, and met I met my good friend Matt Rosenberg outside of there, but he was working there when I lived in New York City, and we'd just hang out every day and talk about breaking into comics, and he did as well. So he's doing a lot of DC now, but has been at Marvel and stuff too. And it's one interesting thing about comics in general is like I know so many of the contemporary writers and artists now just because we all kind of broke in together, and it's really nice to see that everyone who is like passionate and stuck with it, like I feel like has had a degree of success, and that really just kind of warms my heart. And again, it can be, all creative arts can be so unforgiving and hard to get into, but I feel like for the most part, comics has been a very like accessible, like good area to be in, and something that people can really pursue. And it's one thing that I'm passionate a lot about teaching. I'm passionate about like talking a lot about the medium, how to actually break in and things like that, because I feel like it is so much more doable than a lot of people think. And at a time where, again, I think there's a lot of like cool new voices out there, it is just something that I am always passionate about. But anyway, I wandered real far away from that question, but grew up in New Jersey. Is the short answer there.
No. And Frank and Arris, and I'm going to let to our listeners know too, it's like, don't worry, because the thing is, because it's your guys, and we're going to lead up to how Astonishing Times came about, but it's your guys' love and passion for comics. That's the main thing. So it's like, don't worry. Like I said, don't worry, don't worry about this. And Frank, I have to comment that that X-Men, 2099, because I remember when it came out, because, and I'm going to say, and correct me if I'm wrong, but, well, let's put it this way. The time, because for me, when Amazing Spider-Man, I think was like reaching, I'm going to show my age. I think, when Peter Parker Spectacular Spider-Man #1 came out, I mean, I was reading Amazing Spider-Man, but Peter Parker Spectacular Spider-Man #1, when it came out, I was like going, oh my God, now I can jump on a #1. So and Frank, I only can imagine that, you getting an X-Men 2099 #1 is be like, I can get onto this series. I don't have to try to figure out, wait, okay, Phoenix died, but she's alive. And wait, so Cyclops, and we all know the history of and Arris, you probably know this more than me, but you know how sometimes the X-Men, and I'm not picking on X-Men, please, it's just an example, but how the X-Men, comics sometimes are a little bit impenetrable.
Yeah, and we didn't have Arris's channel to explain it all to us back then.
Dude, I've said it before, if you think the X-Men is impenetrable, imagine going through Reverse Flash's history. That took me a minute.
Okay. No, yeah, there is something special about being part of a launch like that. And I feel like even more so a little bit more back in the day when stuff wasn't as easily collected or accessible. And that's interesting to hear too, because I also have an extreme fondness for Spider-Man too. Ultimate Spider-Man was the book that I feel like made me really want to even be a writer and like reintroduced me to comics, like, because that was right around like 99, I guess. Like, I guess I was right around also when the Morrison X-Men ended up hitting, because I just started high school and met other kids who read comics for the first time, and we were talking about it, and through that I discovered Powers, and through Powers I discovered Image, and all those other things. Powers is also just one of my all-time favorite comics, which is again, Bendis is really, I think, just a writer who did so much for the industry when he came in.
Yes,
for sure.
Okay, so Arris, I'm going to ask, so I'm just going to ask Arris, is that basically it's like, what about you, Arris? What was your first comic or comics that you read, and, what was your first LCS?
My first comic that I ever read was one of the Nightfall series, I believe, because again, 90s, so Batman Nightfall.
Yes.
But it was, I don't remember exactly what issue, but it was I don't know the issue number on the top of my head, but it was one of the issues. It was a Nightfall or Night Quest, the one where Batman is tied to a tree and Poison Ivy is like right next to him, like looking down at him. I don't know if that's ringing a bell for either of you, but it was one Nightfall or Night Quest that's like right in there, because I just remember like going to my local comic book store and seeing like this armored Batman. I'm like, what is this? This is so freaking cool. It's like, you know, a full-on armored Batman with like all these spikes and like claws on his hands and all that stuff. And at the time I thought, you know, I just would buy stuff based on covers, right? And then read it when I got home. I'm like, why is Bruce like in this weird thing, only to find out it's like, oh, that's not Bruce. Like that's why Bruce got his back hurt by Bane, right? So so someone's filling in for him. But the Nightfall / Night Quest was my first entry into comic books. That, and actually a reprint of Amazing Fantasy 15. So the first Spider-Man. So to this day, my two favorite comic book characters are Batman and Spider-Man. So you know, those were my entryways. Like most, I think they're fan favorites for a reason, just because globally everyone can relate to them, and they're just you know, they're as far as Spider-Man and Batman, they're kind of like night and day, where Peter Parker's kind of like the young, kind of cool, like you can relate to him, especially being a kid. You're like, oh, I'm not cool, I'm a nerd, but if I got powers, I would do cool things and save people. And then Batman's like what every kid wishes he could be, right? Where it's like, if I get really, really rich and I could buy some tech and get a Batmobile and go out there and be awesome and, you know, beat the Joker. But yeah, so Amazing Spider-Man 15 reprint and Nightfall / Night Quest were my entries into actually reading comic books. And then, you know, because when I first started reading, I was young, you know, I don't know, between 8 and 10. Like, I didn't really know. I would just buy stuff based on cover. So a lot of times I wasn't even reading full storylines. I was just jumping into the middle, because I'm like, oh, this looks cool. But over time, you know, you learn, and, you know, you get friends now that are into comic books and stuff like that. And you just like, you meet the people at the comic book shop, because I was still young, but my dad and my mom would become friends with them, and they'd be like, oh, if he likes this, he'll like that. And then, you know, you start getting trades. And then once I got a little older, I got into The Killing Joke, Dark Knight Returns, all the classics and stuff like that. And then obviously Spawn. I was huge on Spawn, because that was the new big thing at the time, right? Like Image. So Spawn was a big thing. And as far as my local comic book shop, I don't know if it's still in Florida, but one of the ones I went to, which wasn't in the same city as me, but it was a little farther, it was bigger, Past, Future, and Present Comics, which was around 20 minutes from where I lived, but it was awesome. It was huge. And then another one, which I know is still around, this wasn't in the same city as me, but it was like 20 minutes away, and I think it's still the biggest comic book shop in South Florida, Tate's Comics. In, I think, is it Deerfield or something, Deerfield, Florida, something like that. I'm probably remembering wrong, but Tate's Comics, I'm sure if you live in Florida, you've at least heard of it. It's massive. It's the biggest one in South Florida. So those are the two that stick with me to this day. But that, like Frank said, like in the 90s, it was pretty much everywhere in the States. Like you could pretty much throw a dart and find a comic book shop.
I agree with you guys, because I remember because I mean, back in the 90s, I mean, it was, I feel like in the late 80s, I remember that there were only, and I could be wrong, but you know, because I lived at a different part of Oahu, and there would be like 2 comic shops, direct market comic shops, like you know, 2 blocks away from each other. That's fine. That was fine. And then all of a sudden in the 90s, it was like already there were like 4 comic shops, like literally in a half mile. And then by the early 2000s, the only 2 that were standing were the ones that were there, you know, that were there back in the 80s, you know. But no, but
and I just looked it up because I had to know it was going to bother me. So the Nightfall issue I was talking about, it's Batman 495, Nightfall Part 7.
Oh,
so there it is. And I still have that book somewhere in one of my short boxes in a closet here, and which is, you know, it's beat to crap because I was a kid, but I'm never getting rid of that.
No, but it's kind of like, but it's like one of those where it's like it has that sentimental value.
Yes.
That's the key thing. And then Frank, I'm just asking, do you still have your copy of X-Men 2099 #1?
I do. It's probably in such bad condition because, as I said, it's in like a binder with, like, I had bought, like, someone had sold like peak 90s stuff. Like they had sold like because you know how they're like the baseball card pages to put them in a binder. They had sold ones that were for comic books as well. So I had all of them in a big old green binder, like 3-ring binder somewhere.
That's awesome.
I'm gonna find it. I'm gonna go visit my dad in the fall, and I definitely need to find that.
Dude, you know what's really cool? Now that I Googled it, so that issue of the Batman 495 I was talking about from Nightfall came out in June of 1993, and June is my birthday month. So that's freaking, look at that. Full circle.
Which I remember, again, I won't take us off track to talk too much about comics, but I remember I was just telling someone buying the one where Azrael takes over and he's wearing like that mecha Batman suit and kills Bane, like spoilers for
Asbat.
But I remember buying that off a spinner rack at a smoke shop, quote smoke shop, which was like our stationery store, which I'm like in like my local like town, like just in, it's just like, oh yeah, just remembering that comics were everywhere and you could just grab.
I remember Circle K used to have a spinner rack by me in Margate, Florida. Like spinner racks were everywhere. Like I miss the spinner racks. You could find them at some shops here and there, but like again, you were saying you could find them at 7-Eleven, Circle K's,
literally
like anywhere.
Like so many places. And, and like you said, just grab random issues. There's so many. I went back and like reread a lot of X-Men, as I do really love X-Men as well. Like I'm like, I'm going to read every issue of X-Men. Did not make it, but I looked through a lot, and it was so surreal seeing just like random issues I had read as a kid that were just floated my way or like grabbed at a store. And I mean, one thing that was really interesting before we move on was my parents knew we liked comics and knew we liked X-Men. So for like Christmas or our birthdays and things like that, would just grab whatever they could. And one thing I still have on my bookshelf was a Marvel Masterworks of the giant size X-Men #1 into that new run of X-Men where Wolverine debuted. And I read that, I was probably like 10 and like never realized like that was such a formative historical piece of X-Men history. And like it just so fascinating to look at now and be like, oh man, yeah, I probably didn't really even read all the word balloons when I was a kid. Just looked through it and tried to try. Yeah.
Same.
So again, listeners, and Frank and Arris, like I said, don't worry, because we're here to celebrate comics and just to hear you guys just talk about your love for comics, about, it's just bringing back great memories, for all of us. So don't worry about, going too long or going, hey, I remember I bought this, and don't worry about that, because we're here to celebrate comics. That's the main thing. So, all right. So after I said that, I gotta get on track.
Let's get to the business.
Okay. So how did you guys meet?
We met through a mutual friend that was a childhood friend from Frank, actually, but I met him through Ryan, again, the other co-creator for Variant. And then he's like, hey, I have you have this comic book show. I have this friend that I grew up with, and he's currently having a comic book coming out on Image Comics. Maybe I can get you guys together, and if you want to interview him for the show or something like that, that'd be awesome. And that was when Five Ghosts was coming out for Frank at the time. So
I didn't realize your channel was so new at the time too, because you had such a pro atmosphere around you.
Yeah, we were only a year or two in, because this was like what, 2013, 2014?
Yeah, it was definitely 2013. Yeah,
2013. Okay, so
2013 or 2014 at the latest.
Yeah, so this was like 2 years into Variant, and I was like, oh, that's dope. I think Frank was actually one of my first creator interviews. I don't know. Did you know that, Frank? I don't even think you knew that.
I don't even know. No, I definitely did not. I was in the whirlwind of just like, oh wait, someone actually wants to like talk to me and tape me. Like, I can't believe that's a thing.
So got Frank on, obviously. I interviewed him about the comic, and we just kept talking after that. We became friends, and throughout the years, I think he came back like a second time. We would meet up at Comic Cons and stuff like that, and then we just became friends. I was like, hey Frank, would you ever want to do a comic book? He was like, yeah, maybe I'll definitely be down to do that. And it was one of those things, we said in passing at first. Another year or two went by, and we're like, hey, remember the time you still want to do it? Yeah. So eventually, around the third or fourth time, we're like, all right, it's time. We've talked about it for a while now. Let's do it. And luckily, his schedule lined up, my schedule lined up. I mean, it took some doing. I think we have a long story with that. It took a while, but we eventually did it. And it kind of, the idea, what Astonishing Times became now is not what originally was, because I said it in a past interview or something like that, where it sounds hilarious, but like it was kind of like the initial idea of me like going to Frank and be like, hey, I have this idea for this thing, let's do this, before we made it evolve, was from a fever dream. I had the flu like a few years ago, and like I had this concept for a comic book, and I was like, yo, Frank, you think this is cool? He's like, yeah, it's pretty cool, but what if we do this, this, and this? And it evolved, and he came back to me with this, and I came back to that with this, and then eventually it became Astonishing Times. But I just think it's funny to now say that, like, it's sparked with a fever dream, because that just makes me laugh. So, like, from here on out, anyone who asks, I was just like, it started with the fever dream that me and Frank got together and we banged it out, and now it's Astonishing Times.
And I think it's like, because you had like floated that idea to me so many times, I was like, yeah, for sure, one of these days. But when you finally came at me with like, oh, like I actually had an idea, it really got us talking. And again, we won't spoil Arris's original idea, as he'll probably pursue it one day, but I was definitely like transitioning, I think, into my like grumpy comics phase at this time. Like again, working in comics full time is a hard job. It is a lot. You always need to think about what you're doing next, like talking to a bunch of different people, like hoping that like there's availability, hoping that your brand is still strong, that people are still buying your books. And for me, it really exhausted me. And why I thankfully ended up getting a full-time job in games, which again is just a support structure I need. Like freelance is too much for me full-time. I still love comics. I'm so thankful I can make them on a much more relaxed schedule now. But that's when Arris really started engaging with me on this. And I was just like, I don't know if I can make a comic, Arris. I don't have it in me right now. And I definitely can't do a superhero comic, because I don't want to do one. There's no market for creator-owned superheroes. Not true. But at the time I was very burned out, and that sounds negative, but the plus side of that is we got talking a lot, and Arris was so passionate, and like I started talking about like, well, if we did do a superhero comic, this is what would get me excited about it. And it started a very healthy and organic conversation about like what we wanted the book to be. And if I was going to do a superhero comic in whatever year that was, 2018, like what would make it special, or what would make it unique. And I think that ended up being some of the most productive, like exciting talks we had. And from that, we really grew what became Astonishing Times. And it took a bit of time because of many different things, but I think we really found the core of it quickly. And in Arris's experience as someone who's clearly also loved comics, but has been in a position where he talks to a lot of people who love comics, again, very different from the position of like a burnt out comics writer, is Arris, who's been creating this very positive, excited content, talking to a lot of people, seeing different people's opinion, seeing what they love, was a really unique perspective to hear, and really inspiring for me to think about like, okay, like how do we convert that to our story? Not necessarily catering to that audience, but remembering like, okay, what is something that can be new and exciting, but also celebratory and like healthy towards the medium, instead of cynical or dark for the sake of darkness. And I think that's where we really turned ahead, and we're like, hey, like, and again, I'm a huge nerd and like very, very into like writing theory and like deep theme and things like that. And probably annoyingly so, like with the title Arris, oh man, like I'm so happy we landed on Astonishing Times, as we love it, and it really encapsulates the book. But we went through so many titles because our book is about a journalist, and that's a big part of it. Is I feel like journalism in general for comics is often not really celebrated, but there are so many people who passionately write about comics and superheroes and just the whole medium, and there's a real love there, because it's clearly not like an easy money job or something like that people do. And I was really passionate about getting a story that had a journalist who unequivocally, unironically loves comics as the main character. And in our book, they love superheroes because superheroes are real in their world. But that was a really nice entry point. And I think the big thing, I was like, Arris, whatever the name of the book is, has to be the name of his column. So clearly we need parody there, because we thought of all these great titles, but I'm like, that doesn't sound like a newspaper column though. And
that sounds like a story arc title.
But I feel like I veered off of it, but it really was just great to talk with Arris healthily about this. And I say healthy because I was very burned out on comics. And
well, I think that helped us though, right?
No,
for sure.
It
balanced us out. Like, saying you were coming out of like this, I guess, quote unquote, grumpy stage of writing comic books, where I was like the fresh meat to, writing comics. But I was like, dude, what if we do this with this character and we have this and that? And then, you would go and be like, okay, that's cool. We could place this here. We could do that. And it just added a good dynamic where, you know, you were like, as you say, like the nerd writer, as far as like, well, we have to make sure we get this across at this, you know, the whole act of the story. And I'm just like, dope, but we need this character, and we need to have, you know, this character's going to have that power. And then by this, like, he'll do this or she'll do that. So it worked out really, really well in that sense, whereas like we kind of both had what we were excited about, and then we just merged it together, and it became hopefully a really good story.
And that's why I go back quickly. Like, I was very reticent to do original superhero stuff because for the longest time, like, obviously there's been some really amazing breakthroughs like throughout the history of comics, but in the more modern era, like you guys were saying, even Spawn, but then the new class of Image, like Kirkman with Invincible, and like I feel a few others have broken through, and
The Boys.
But it's just an intimidating space because I just didn't want, and I feel like lots of creators feel this way, I just don't want to do my crummy Batman story, but I can't actually write Batman, or my crummy Spider-Man story, but I can't actually write Spider-Man right now. But so I've always been very intimidated. And the only other crack I took was I did a book called Black Market at Boom Studios, which was a book that very much was like inspired by my love of powers, and with an artist whom I adore, Victor Santos, who's been an amazing co-creator with me since then. But I feel like I got what I needed out of that. So I was just very, like, had a question mark when Arris came to me and said, like, okay, what do I think we need to say about superheroes now? And thankfully, like I said, I was very much full of, especially after talking with Arris, like very full of like positivity and like excitement and good things, not cynical things, because I think it's very easy to be cynical, especially even myself saying, like, as a writer, I was very burnt out. I was tired of this material, like in the endless churn of trying to create. And I really wanted something that was inspirational, something exciting, and something that celebrated the medium as well as people who like the medium. And as I said, we're not trying to just go for fan service, but I think there is a real lack of material out there that doesn't treat the medium and the genre of superheroes like not reverent, but like as something that is worth pursuing, like unironically. Like there's always like a wink or like, oh, this is kind of silly, and we want to stay away from that because like these stories really do resonate and are huge parts of many people's lives now more than ever with everything. And it was just very much our mission to not tread like the same cynical ground. And again, I'm not saying cynicism overly negative. I think there's been some really beautiful deconstruction. Obviously, Watchmen is one of my favorite books, but like we just didn't want to go in that angle because I think when you're doing creator-owned superheroes, there is a temptation quickly to fall into that. Like, okay, well, let's deconstruct, let's find the problems, and let's. But we wanted to do something that felt in that love letter type space, but not at the expense of being an interesting story with something new to say as well. Because we really, while our message is largely more positive, I think it still is reflective and takes an examination of like, what does almost this genre, this fandom mean in 2021? And that's my TED talk. So thank you everyone for coming. But
Arris, I'm going to ask, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think, I agree obviously with everything Frank said, but, to expand on that a little more, it's like, to go what he was saying as far as like a lot of the most successful like comic books with even the big two right now are kind of like taking the not, I don't want to say negative approach, but like the apocalyptic approach, right? In the sense where like Injustice, it's all about an evil Superman with the superheroes dying every issue, which is dope. One of my favorite series. But we see a lot of that. Even like Deceased is like a zombie apocalypse type thing. Marvel has just announced a brand new series that's going to be post-apocalyptic too. Even The Boys, which is hugely successful and I love, but that's again dealing with like the evilness of characters and stuff like that. Where we wanted to kind of flip that, like because it's like at its core, it's like, why do kids in general, or us when we're young, gravitate towards these men and women in capes and tights, right? And I think it's just because people ultimately want to be good and help people, right? So it's like you're automatically kind of driven to that, like even subconsciously, which is why stereotypically, again, it's like, what do you want to be when you grow up? A firefighter. What do you want to be when you grow up? A doctor. It's all those things are helping people and helping the world. So what's like the pinnacle of that? It would be a superhero. Well, now you actually have powers to literally change the world, and no one could stop you, even these big bad supervillains. So I think it's just something subconsciously we're born with, instinctual, because yes, there's a lot of crap in this world. There's a lot of bad, especially over this last year or so. The world has been turned upside down. But I think at the end of the day, you know, there's more good in the world, you know, and I think Frank and I both kind of wanted to reflect on that a little bit. Now, again, you know, there's a lot of stuff that happens in our comic book that's not all sunshine and rainbows, but, you know, but the message at the end is like, look, I keep saying this, I'll probably be saying this for all the press that I do for this book, but it's one of my favorite lines that we came up for the book is in there. It's like, we look up not for someone to save us, but for the hope of a better tomorrow. And I think that right there encompasses everything we try to say and do with Astonishing Times, you know, to be like, hey, there's always hope. Let's keep going on to do better things.
Okay. I'm gonna jump around a little bit, Arris, because I'm gonna say when this project was greenlit, how did your inner child react to this? I mean, you running around the house going, "Oh my god!"
Dude, it was freaking crazy because this is a, you know, Frank's done a bunch, so he's like, yeah, I've done so many.
Grumpy Frank,
yeah. Frank's done stuff for Marvel, you know, and all the big guys, so he's a veteran. So, but for me, like, this is like a childhood dream. This is my first like realization of, hey, like, if you would have told 8-year-old Arris that by the time, you know, he's older and he's an adult, he would be, you know, writing characters and co-creating this universe that people will hopefully love and enjoy, and one day go to a comic book shop and pick it up, and his name is on the title, right, of the cover, it blew my mind. So like when they got greenlit, I was like, yes, this like it was one of those things where, you know, when you're so happy, you're kind of in shock a little bit, you know, where it's like, you're not just like running around, you're just kind of like, wait, is this real? Like someone's like, you're making fun of me, this is a lie, right? Like kind of that thing. But to be honest, like, it still hasn't hit me fully. Like it's weird because it's like gradually happening. Like when we announced the book, that's when it really got real for me, because the whole Variant Nation and, you know, everyone was commenting like, that's so awesome, we're so happy for you guys, and we got tons and tons of positive comments on it. So that's when it really hit. But I think the day that I go to a comic book shop or any, you know, shop that sells comic books or trades, and I see like the physical book on the shelf with my last name on the cover, I'm gonna sob in the middle of that comic store like a little baby.
I was gonna say, Arris, we already also did so much of the hard work before it's out, because we thankfully have finished the book before it even comes to market, and like Arris got to like see the whole like, oh, this is like the physical, like long drawn out process of bringing your creative vision to life before any of the exciting parts. So hopefully now you can just sit back and enjoy.
No, for real. And you know, at the end of the day, I'm just like thankful for everyone, like Frank, for, you know, doing it with me, and you know, because again, I'm the noob, right? I've never done anything before, so I say it all the time. But Frank, I was like, yo, Frank, like I literally text this to him or said it on a phone call to me. I'm like, you're gonna have to be my Yoda, okay? This is like Empire Strikes Back, okay? You're gonna be on my back, and I'm gonna be doing handstands all Luke style, and you're gonna teach me how to use the Force here, okay? But thankfully it worked out, and I've learned a whole lot, and it's been a ton of fun. Dream come true. It's still gonna be weird to when the first issue drops and to see, you know, people's reactions of it. Even now, like, we've already got some fan art of people like loving the designs of like Koken and Infinite and stuff like that. It's just like it's so weird to see people react to something that was in your brain, and now they're like, oh no, this is a thing, we like it. The first time someone cosplays one of our characters, I'll probably also cry. I got two girls. I'm too sensitive for this crap now.
So Frank, I'm just gonna make a comment. You know what's really nice is that I know, you know, like you mentioned, it's kind of like, you know, kind of like you're, you know, as you mentioned, that you're kind of, you know, slowly burning out. Arris comes with this, you know, with this comic book idea. What's really nice is that you guys balance each other out through this.
For sure. I think that's one of the reasons why, you know, well, we're just friends in general, but I think that definitely helped a lot, because like the things I was excited about, he was burnt out on. So I guess I would pick up some of the slack on that. The things I didn't know much about was the stuff he wanted to do a lot of and was, you know, better at. So it kind of just evened out, which was great.
Yeah. And obviously, like we talked a bit about this on other podcasts, and I think on Variant, but it's something I don't shy away from. Like, I'm very much an open book about the industry, about writing, about craft, and like a lot of people are very curious about the act of co-writing, but like I really love co-writing in the form I do it, as there's many different ways you can co-write. Like some people literally will be so granular as to like, oh, I'll write 5 pages, you write 5 pages. But the way I do it is much more almost like a writer's room type method, where in this case, Arris and I, we just got together, we talked out the story. Like I thankfully know enough about structuring and enough about like how to pace out a comic that I could put down some guideposts. But then we just talked it through and about what was exciting to us, what we were trying to do. And that's when you, to me, write the book, quote unquote. Like that's like talking about what is actually there. And that's the fun part. Like that's, for me, a lot of that's the puzzle. That's the like, oh, this is how things fit together. But like literally, as I said, I'm a twin. So I am a kind of collaborative, sharey person by nature, because I grew up always having to do that. But thankfully, like it works for me. And writing can be such a solitary, lonely job, and getting to do it with someone else was such a joy. And again, our co-writing was extremely collaborative, to the point when we finally had to write the scripts, like comic scripts as well are instructions for someone to draw. Like they're not romantic to write. So we already knew exactly what went on every page, and we just got those out. We worked on the dialogue together, and then gave it over to our artist, Ruri Coleman, who is fantastic. We have not brought up nearly enough, but you will all see plenty of. But again, another collaborator who just gets in there and then brings it to life. But from the writing perspective, again, it was really fun and just like hanging out, like for lack of a better term, like playing make believe together, but with some more structure. And it is a really healthy, productive way to kind of escape that kind of burnout or being tired on your own. But as I said, we really hope to make some like really cool content with Barbiere that is a little more instructional as well. Because I am very passionate about like, hey, like, okay, you have a vision, you have an idea. There's so little resources that show you that in between. Like, I think there are a lot of great writing classes and great writing books, but there's so little that actually tells you like, oh, like how do you actually go from I have an idea to making, in this case, a comic book. And I am very passionate about sharing that information, that knowledge, because it really just is weirdly tribal knowledge that people share in the industry. And I'm so thankful for the people who were patient with me when I was breaking in, and people who I would ask questions at cons. And I know that can be awkward, and everyone's not so type A like me who will get out there and ask people. So I'm very passionate about bringing that information to people who want it as well.
Well, that was, going off what you said about writing the book, Frank, that was one of the coolest things that, I learned, as far as like, it's funny because, going again, I never wrote a comic book before, right? You do stuff on your own and you mess around, but never like, oh no, this is going to be published with Comixology. Dark Horse is going to make it a trade later on. Like this is a real comic book, right? So I didn't know how to do it, but it was cool learning at least the way we did it, and this, which I love. I find myself going to want to do this going forward. Is like Frank said, we got together in an office and banged out the entire 5-issue arc in that day. So like, in the sense of we knew where it was starting, we knew where it was going to be in the middle, and we knew how we wanted to end. So with all the posts there, knowing where we wanted to go and at what issue we wanted to go, it was really easy to like then go back later, especially like because after that, then we would break it down by like page by page and bullet points. Be like, panel 1, we want this character to do that. Panel 2, this, right? So then like once you know what you want every character to do, it's so much easier to write in the dialogue. And that's a big thing Frank taught me. I was like, because at first I was really worried about the dialogue, and he's like, dude, don't worry about the dialogue. That's like the easy part. I'm like, all right. So, and he's right, because once you know where everything is going, what you're doing, like, what the character has to say, more or less. There's only so many ways you could say a certain thing, right? So it made a lot of sense, and I love it. And it's, I find myself when I go to co-write things in the future, it's like, I'm going to want to do this method. It's going to be we got to coin it, Frank. We got to coin this. Just the Marvel method. We got to coin this method.
but I will say too, as I said, we also had the luxury of like talking about it and really take our time, like probably over the course of 2 or 3 years, like about what we would want to be in there. So when it finally came down to like, hey, let's like actually break the plot for the book, I think we were both just like rearing and ready to go. But
the fact that we were slow burning this over 2 years definitely helped.
Sorry. Continue on.
I was just gonna say it was generally like a good time. Some things are harder than others in creative life, but this came pretty easily, and I think we pretty quickly snapped into place as collaborators.
So I'm going to backtrack on one of the questions because you guys may have answered it, but just for the listeners, can you guys just go without spoiling anything? What is the premise of Astonishing Times? Because correct me if I'm wrong. The main character is Noah Sands. Is that correct?
Yes, Noah Sands. Yes.
And then there's a murder mystery in this that starts it off. Is that correct?
Yes. You are correct on both accounts.
Okay. Anything else you want to add on that? Anything else or?
I guess I'll start it, and Frank could add anything else.
We just talked so much about this for variants, so I'm curious to see how well you do before I do. Oh no, we do want to get it out there. I'm just saying, hopefully we're prepped now to do it succinctly.
So basically, the story follows our main character, protagonist, Noah Sands, who he's essentially like his dad was basically like the Jimmy Olsen of our universe, right? Where he was like the reporter. He was really tight with the superheroes of this universe, but he unfortunately died. So now Noah is living in the shadow of his father, and he's in this world at this point in time. It's a few years after the Cataclysm, which is where heroes saved humanity. But like because of that, just over the years, just kind of like I guess everything in life, once something is around so often and so much, you just kind of get used to it. So it became commonplace. But he's like one of the few dudes in this world. It's like, guys, like this isn't a normal thing. You know what I mean? Like these people are still awesome. Like you shouldn't be used to someone like flying in and like, saving these kids who are like falling off a cliff or something like that. It's like, that's something that needs to constantly be celebrated and not forgotten. So he has this column called Astonishing Times, and his boss is basically like, hey man, sales are not going so good. You have one shot to get like the best story of your life. And we learned that he's only doing that because of who his father was, right? He's like, because your dad is who he was, I'll let you get one last shot, dude. And that kind of throws Noah, he's getting worried. He doesn't want to tell his wife and all that stuff. And, without giving too much away, he inevitably comes, he meets one of his, childhood heroes, and they end up, getting into shenanigans with one another and having to solve this big murder mystery, as you mentioned earlier. And, that's kind of the premise, Frank. Do you want to elaborate a little more on that? Did I leave anything out?
I think that's great. And I feel like that is the like plot stuff we want to lead with up front. This is all pretty early issue 1 stuff, but, I think even in just hearing what Arris was saying, like this is a book that I'm so excited that we came up with this really cool, exciting plot that gets you in and definitely twists into, I think, some unexpected places as it goes forward. But really just we want to create this like really nice kind of parallel to a lot of modern superhero fandom. Again, the idea that we're so inundated in superhero movies, like merch, like comics, and people are kind of forgetting what this stuff was supposed to stand for, what it's supposed to be like. So we love that we have a character who we found a really nice analog, who inherited this column from his father, who tries to see the good in superheroes and is just like not cynical and angry, but like more like, come on, everyone, like, do you not see there are literally people flying outside your window? And in a big like kind of metaphor in the book is this idea of looking up, like Arris was saying before, like Noah will like lament in his column, like no one looks up anymore, like no one cares that there are literally people flying around. And with his column, he makes a big decree, like this year I'm going to show you why, like you're going to remember we have to look up. And then as Arris said, it becomes very dire that he's going to lose the column. And he does end up stumbling headfirst kind of into this murder mystery that's very out of his leagues, but it also gives him a chance to kind of confront his heroes face to face for the first time. And we had so much fun with that, and the idea of like, oh, like what would it be like to have like a normal human protagonist working alongside, and that's something I think is often done for laughs or not really explored. But I was so glad we have a like human protagonist in our story who again is able to like be a foil to the superheroes, and we obviously get deep into the superheroes as well as their fun, interesting characters, but it was really a conscious decision for us to have a normal person at the core of this, because we want to talk about, again, we want to closely identify with our readers who are probably not superheroes, but still think about that lens, because it is, the genre is a very real part of our lives, blah blah blah. But no, it is definitely a love letter to the genre, a love letter to superheroes, and a love letter to journalism in the sense that we don't really get into the nuts and bolts of journalism. I'm not going to try to make anyone think I suddenly went to journalism school, but I just really, through my career, have had so much support from comics journalists, and this is such a small business, and retailers as well. I mean, anything I've been able to do has been because of their support, and it's a small way to pay it forward. But again, I think it's also really fruitful ground. Obviously, like there's some stories that have explored things like this before, like Marvels is a big one, but I'm really happy that we found our own corner, and I feel like we found a really kind of like modern and energetic like story for now with it.
My next question is going to be, now no spoilers, can you guys go over some of the characters in this series, and how did you guys come up with these characters too?
For sure. Do you want to divvy them up, Frank, or do you want to
you can kind of take us through. I know we just did, and if you want to kind of maybe hype up the fact that, because Jason, forgive me, when will we be putting this interview out?
I'm going to say probably within the next couple weeks.
All right, cool.
Okay. Okay. Awesome.
We'll have some good companion content coming soon too that we can point to. So
awesome. All right, so yeah, we can definitely tease some of the characters. So obviously we have Noah, who we just kind of went over as he's the main character and what he gets into. But as far as the heroes in the book, we have Koken, who's our cyberpunk samurai. So he's basically like the best. He's like the most badass dude in our universe, in the sense of like he knows all the martial arts, all this stuff. As far as a quick overview of him, essentially this dude had anger issues, heard of this secret society in Japan. It was like called the Koken. He finds out, and XYZ reasons he becomes the Koken, because the Koken isn't just his name, it's the title that you earn by being like their leader, essentially, like that. So that's like how crazy he is. He was able to be like the dude. But we're actually doing an episode, or we actually did an episode on him and Noah on Variant spotlight episode. So people could actually, after listening to this, if you want to hear us, me, Frank, and Rui, our artists, we go into detail about their origin and creation of both those characters. So if you head over to Variant Comics on YouTube and just type in Noah Koken, it'll come right up, and you get to hear our deep dive on the characters.
One thing I'll jump in with Arris too, like clearly one of the joys of doing this book was the idea to play with archetypes.
Yes.
And like obviously, like we didn't want to just be like, oh, this is our bad analog of the Justice League, but there are very prevalent superhero archetypes, and Koken is definitely our dark vigilante archetype. Like we had a lot of fun spinning him into our own thing, but hopefully people will enjoy being able to look at like that. And as I said, we're not an intense deconstruction, but clearly we wanted to play off these archetypes, and Koken started from our conversation of like, okay, what would that like one-man army human, like, because I don't know if you mentioned to Arris, you got her. Koken is a human who just uses like tech and tools to be a superhero. I think that's a big part of who he ends up being as well.
Yeah, for sure. He's the whole cyberpunk thing. So just he's a dude who like over injuries and stuff like that, he's like, oh, metal arm, metal leg. Now I got but super enhanced, and he takes like everything he touches he modifies. So even the stuff from the Koken clan and stuff like that, with all the classic and awesome samurai weapons, he's like, these are really cool, but what would they look like with like future tech on them, and just makes them like 10 times cooler. You know what I mean? So he's definitely like our vigilante, I guess, quote unquote Batman type character in the book. And like Frank said, they're very prevalent, types of characters you have to have. So like one of our next characters, he runs really fast. So automatically he's our quote unquote speedster in the book, Gold Rush. He's really, really cool. And he's kind of like the right-hand man, I'd say, to Infinite, who's our big boy in the book. He's our powerhouse in our universe, where literally his name is Infinite because he has infinite power. He draws his power from all life in the universe, sentient or not. A lot of people, when we did the announcement video, so they're like, so essentially he's a living spirit bomb from Dragon Ball Z. And we're like, yeah, pretty much. Like, what would that look like if we embodied like that into a person? You know what I mean? Because the geek, like Frank, we were saying earlier, it's like the fanboy comes out in me and Frank. So it's like, well, what if we did this? We turned it on its heels, and literally he's like a living spirit bomb. That'd be awesome. So that's Infinite.
And that was, again, we'll be quick here, but like we really did these deep dives, and it is taking that trope of the Superman type archetype, and we're like, okay, first of all, how can we make it interesting so it's not just our bad version of Superman, but secondly, like, how can we push it even further and find something unique? And I think Arris, even hearing him speak about it now, like his enthusiasm really came through as we got to do the fun exercise of making our own superheroes, but also making our own world, which has been very excited too. Like, obviously, like, we both have read comics for a long time. Our audience has read comics for a long time, but we were very happy to like grow out not only these characters, but like our own timeline, our own like lore, our own events, and like really create something that we feel like we can continue writing into and play with and say a lot with, but do it organically. I think Jeff Lemire has done a beautiful job with Black Hammer and in turning that into his own kind of like universe. And that was something that was also just very inspiring to me, seeing how he played with those archetypes and how he kind of twisted that in a great way to become his own thing. And it was very much one of the modern books I think does it so well that I think I told you to read Black Hammer when we started writing, right? Arris, check that out. But yeah, Infinite, definitely, you see him right on our cover. The first cover is Noah standing in front of graffiti of Infinite that says, "Where did you go?" And Infinite is very much our poster child of like, if you are talking about superheroes in the world of Astonishing Times, Infinite is the go-to. Like, this is the best one.
He's the man.
The one we all look towards.
And then briefly going through, we have some other, we have Crossout, Medica, some other cool characters like, Telepaths, a healer. And we run the gamut, of hopefully bringing a lot of cool and unique characters. Because again, there's only so many power sets you can give, but it's always fun. What I found the most fun about the book is trying to reinvent the wheel in the sense where like, okay, there's someone that could run faster, that could heal someone, but how can you make that different? What if we did it this way to now it feels like something new? So, hopefully we did that. And
one thing we'll speak to a lot in like the spotlight is that our artist Ruri Coleman like came in and just did beyond phenomenal design for these characters. It's so hard to tell someone like, hey, here's a superhero, make sure it looks like super iconic and lived in and not like bad, like go for it. But he brought so much, I don't know, just like dynamism and like lived in design to these characters, and like came up with so many cool little design elements, and like especially for the tech driven characters like Koken and Medica, like little, and even Gold Rush, like little things on their costumes that do special things, like new powers, and like the three of us just gelled so well together. And I think just it was even more inspiring once we really started getting everything going, to be like, oh my gosh, like there's so much, like we're just scratching the surface of this iceberg a little bit.
Oh yeah, for Ruri is the man, and he did a lot of awesome stuff, and a lot of his drawings would inform us to be like, oh, well now we got to make this character this way or that way because that just looks so cool. You know what I mean?
Which is always one of the things I love about comics, because so many people are like, why don't you just write novels or things like that? I'm like, well, like I love being able to see it and getting art in and being inspired by the art. And I've been so fortunate to work with so many different artists over my career so far, but in every single one has a little bit different way of seeing things. And again, Ruri has just gelled with us so well, and I can't wait for everyone to see his work.
Yep.
Is there anyone else you guys on the creative team you guys want to give a shout out to? The colorists? I'm not being sarcastic.
Oh, no. Yeah, I will shout our whole team out. And Arris, Katri, but then our colorist, Lauren Affey, who has worked with me since Five Go, so I'm so glad to have her on the book as well. She's been another frequent collaborator in my career, and just I think her work with Ruri has really just given the book a really beautiful, unique style. Our letterer, Taylor Esposito, again, someone I've been so fortunate to work with, who does a great job. He came up with really cool caption types and just font settings for the characters. And our designer, Dylan Todd, who again I've worked with since Five Goes. He did our logo treatment and book design, and he just made such a beautiful logo and book design. And obviously we're very newspaper informed, so we have like some newspaper like credit pages and things like that. And he's just done, and recently he just did, he's very prolific, and everyone we work with is at this point, but he just also did like Department of Truth and things like that. And he's a fantastic designer. I'm so glad. And again, it without being overly mushy, it warms my heart to keep these same people around for a long time, because they're people like they're friends as well as peers, and to be able to have their work still with me is awesome. So but yeah, we really just got to put together our own little dream team here.
For sure. Yeah, everyone we worked with is amazing.
So I have a question. Regarding your creative team, did you guys have to assemble the creative team before going to Comixology, or did Comixology said you have to use these people? How did that work? How did that come about?
Do you mind if I jump on that real quick, Arris?
No, yeah, go for it.
So we did everything ourselves, which is great. Like we're in a very great place where a lot of the books I've done, specifically through Image, like you don't have editors. Like you can hire one if you want, but you put together by yourself and basically make the whole comic, then turn it into the publisher, and they'll do like proofing and pre-press. But I'm a big fan of that process. Like I learned to do it painstakingly over the years, as you have to do everything yourself. But with Astonishing Times, we've been so fortunate that Comixology has been an amazing partner, and really just we turned them in the done book and are ready to go. So we assembled everything ourselves, and it really gave it in this. I'll bring it back to you, Arris. Like speaking truth, it's why it's felt like almost like our own little weird garage project, because we've just been making it in our own little corner for so long, and then be like, oh wait, but it'll be done. But yeah, we're given total flexibility there, and I frankly just prefer it this way. Like I've worked everywhere and had all levels of involvement, where sometimes I just turn in a script and I'll see the book when it's on the shelf, but then sometimes I'll painstakingly do every little part. And honestly, like it just goes back to that creator-owned mentality of like, it really feels like it's yours when you know where every panel and every staple is, pretty much.
No, yeah, Comixology was great. Like, just to put it simple, like Frank said, we got to assemble our team, and then we're like, here you go, and they were like, dope. So they've been great to work with, and really believed in our book and our story. So no complaints, all the praise in the world.
Yeah, and the one thing I will say, not to get too into behind the curtain creating comics, but typically when you do create a comic, and the way we made Astonishing Times is you make the first 5 pages done, like full color, full art, lettering, and normally a cover treatment as well. And that's what you pitch publishers with. So that's what we did here. And just very by the book pitch. And we happened to really resonate with Comixology Originals, and we chose them and then went off and made the book.
Oh, okay.
So all my creator-owned stuff, that's typically how I do it. Like I actually make some of the book first, and you start showing people.
Okay. This is one of the questions I kind of sort of modified right now, but because it sounded like Comixology was in the mix of trying to sell Astonishing Times. Did you guys try to bring it to other publishers? And don't mention publishers' names, but how did that process come about?
At this point, like I've been so fortunate to have work at pretty much every publisher in the US.
Yes.
And for me, it really becomes like, okay, well, we know we can make the book. So what will a publisher bring to the book that is worthwhile to kind of partner with them? And with them, like, I think obviously there's a lot of interest in digital these days. Like it never, I think, has become obviously a predominant form and overtaken print. We love print comics as well. But with Comixology, I feel like we're in a really unique spot where we have a product that has a very big fan base within Variant that is digital by nature. But so that kind of seemed really obvious to me, like, oh, why don't we try here and bring it out as a digital product? But also part of our publishing deal, we will be bringing it to print with Dark Horse Comics eventually as well. So we kind of get the best of both worlds. So we can't complain. But and again, I've worked with Comixology. Well, I haven't worked with them, but I used to work there. I know everyone there, and I've been dying to kind of bring them a project as well. So when this came together, I was like, oh, this is the one. This will be a good fit. And thankfully, I think it ended up being a really, really good match. Because as I said, it's a unique position, and I still get stuff rejected all the time. I'm not, no one is perfect, but at this point in my career, I'm able to be a little more strategic with like, oh, what fits where? And with this project, it just really was a no-brainer.
Arris, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think Frank pretty much nailed it.
This was part of my, like, I think tutelage to Arris
Yeah,
when we
no,
started, like, hey, here's every single publisher, here's what they do, blah blah blah. And
Mhm.
it's very, like, again, it's very not even nerdy, but very, like, behind the curtain, like, stuff that I'm always happy to talk about. And one day we'll probably do videos on a little more specifically, but it is just very, like, logistics at a certain point, right?
no, yeah, you nailed it. And it's, again, like I said before, I can't, say enough how happy I am to be with Comixology, because Chip Mosier and, everyone over there has
Yes.
been awesome thus far. And, I hope to continue to work with them in the future.
I'm just going to make a little comment to our listeners because, I remember hearing about Comixology. Oh God, I can't remember. But, just recently I learned that, that they have like original mini series, and it's not,
Yeah.
and it's like, and it's well-known creators,
Yeah.
which is great. I mean, now it's expanding.
Yeah, and that's what we're part of. It's the Comixology Originals line, and they've built such a great audience, or a great lineup over there. And the one that Chip Zdarsky worked on, Afterlift, actually won an Eisner last year, and Youth by my friend Kurt Piers has been doing great. And I think the first round actually came out in print as well. Dark Horse has started printing a few of the trades as well, and it's just been a really cool, like, new. Not new publisher, so to speak, but again, just has a really exciting shine on it still. So we're glad to get in here and be part of this. Not quite the first class, but the first wave maybe. But it is definitely. And again, I cannot thank the direct market enough, like, for giving me a career. I love print comics. I live and breathe collecting, but here we're just so excited that we get a little bit of both worlds, and taking a chance on being like, hey, let's go digital first and see if we can maybe bring more people into that ecosystem as well. Because I know there's been not quite a divide, but digital just never really completely caught on, I think, as a discovery tool. And it's something we're going to be talking a lot about, because I think there's room for people to really discover a lot of new stuff here, as well as in print. And as I said, I cannot be more thankful to the direct marketing retailers, and we definitely have a lot coming down the line that we can't talk about yet, but, like, ways that we're going to be really promoting the physical trade as well. And I definitely don't want anyone to think they're missing out if that's the case. Like, because that's one of my fears when we did announce the book. I'm like, oh, I hope people aren't like, why aren't you doing print? But it's something we hope to circle back around to it and really push with the trade as well. Because, as I said, I really owe so much of, quite frankly, my life to as I'm able to live it now, to the fact that it's been embraced by, my books have been embraced by the direct market and comics retail. Again, that's my second TED Talk. Sorry, Eric.
For sure. Like, going back to what Jason was saying earlier, Comixology's got some pretty big names lately. Snow Angels with Jeff Lemire and Jock, who are massive names in comic books. That came out a little while ago for Comixology, and it's one of those things where it's, we're fortunate enough to, like, hopefully get in, ground floor in that sense, where it seems to really be something that's happening more and more. And, I'm sure we'll see bigger and better names constantly coming to Comixology, even though Jeff Lemire is, how much bigger do you get than Jeff Lemire, right? As far as us working with Comixology, I think it was a great, like, almost kind of have your cake and eat it too situation, in the sense where, like, it is a digital first, but we're going to be getting a physical trade paperback, through Dark Horse as well. So it's like, it's that perfect world where it's like, initially for the first, 5 months, because it's one issue every month, it's going to be digital, but then, a little bit after that, you'll be able to, like, order the physical trade on Amazon, go to your local comic book store, go to Barnes and Nobles, and, the trade will kind of, live on forever, right? So that's going to be really, really fun.
I'm just going to make a comment about, whether, like, for Comixology, I think what's great with digital comics, and because, I have Marvel Unlimited, I read, whatever, old stuff on there, or whatever stuff that I missed within the last month or so, or last year. But I think what's great with Comixology, especially with you guys, is someone who lives on Lanai, Lanai is one of the smallest islands in the chain. There's no comic book store there. Let's put it this way. They if there was some bookstore over there that sold comics, it's always going to be the big two. And
Right.
the big two, it's always going to be either Spider-Man, Batman, Superman, X-Men. But what's really nice is, like you said, is that you guys have the best of both worlds, because definitely there is internet service on Lanai, or let's put it somewhere, small town US in the middle of nowhere, where the comic book shop is literally, you have to drive, almost a day away to get to the next town, or at least someplace for a comic shop. So these digital comic readers, it's so cool because now they get to read something that's coming out on a monthly basis before the guys at the local comic shops can.
No, you're 100% right. That was, in our announcement video, we had several people comment that, like, I'm so glad it's digital because where I live, there's not a comic book shop in sight. So it makes so much sense because, like, you could, even some of the most rural like places in the world have some sort of internet connection these days, right? So it's like anyone who has access to a smartphone, a tablet, a computer, anything of that sort, you'll be able to read our book, which is really, really, really cool. Yeah. So I love that. And then again, having the best of both worlds for the diehards who are like, I will not read digital. It's like, all right, well then just wait a few months, and you can go pick up the trade. So, we have something for everyone.
I'm going to start slowly wrapping things up. So I'm going to ask, how did you guys, I think you guys covered this, but again, how did you guys narrow it down to this awesome title, Astonishing Times?
A lot of work and failure. No, like Frank did touch on it earlier, but it was pretty much just like, I would come up with something and he'd be like, no, that's good for like a story arc. Or he would come with something, I'm like, I'm not feeling that. And literally this back and forth through phone calls or text messages with, I don't know, Frank, few months. Like long
time.
I don't think, giving a little inside information here, I don't think we had the name for the book until like issue 5 was done or close to being done.
We had a working title that we actually pitched and promoted got the book signed with. And there's, it's funny because you mentioned Amazing Fantasy. I feel like when we were sitting in your office at Barbiere, we were looking at that Spider-Man poster and like, what can we call the book that sounds like that? And we just nailed on we're like, what are cool adjectives? And I think astonishing came up, and then time seemed like an easy follow-up. And it just clicked for me because one, it sounds iconic. I think we got very fortunate that it captures that vibe. But again, it also sounds like the newspaper column. So my brain could just finally cope and be like, yes, that is the one. And then we had to have the awkward honeymoon period of but do we like it? Is it right? But I feel like once our designer Dylan put it into the put it onto the logo dress for us and we saw what it looked like, it just felt very good. So
yeah, it's one of those, it's exactly what Frank said, because I have we kind of did our quote unquote writers workshop in my office in Dallas, and I have an Amazing Fantasy 15 poster hanging out on my wall, and it was I actually remember that, Frank, going through, and it's even going through at the source, right? Well, what's another word for amazing? What's another word for incredible or something? And it kind of harkens back to that timeless thing where it's the Incredible Hulk, the Fantastic Four, the Amazing Spider-Man. So Astonishing Times, where it's a very timeless title name, which hopefully will never sound old or dated because it's just classic. So I think we nailed it with that.
And again, the last nerdy thing I was saying, and thematically too, it just feels very positive and forward looking, and we're so excited because titles are so hard. I hate naming people in books and titles, and I'm so thankful that we were able to land on one that works and captures so much.
Yeah,
because you, like I said, like you guys said, you guys nailed the title because, like I said, Astonishing Times. It's just, to me, when I hear it, it's just full of positive, energy.
That's awesome.
And I'm gonna, it just feels right.
Well,
That's so nice to hear from someone else. Yeah,
for real, that means a lot. You're like, you're making our day here. I'm like, we did it. We did it.
I'm gonna start slowly wrapping things up. I want to ask some fun questions regarding Astonishing Times. Now, I saw in the like some of the preview pages that were shown in the trailer that Noah was reading a comic book on like a subway or on a bus.
Mm-hmm.
Then I see on the back cover Variant Comics. So how did that come about?
What can it mean? Well, very early on, Frank and I talked about putting Easter eggs in the book, and there's something fun that we're gonna do with variant logos in the book that I don't want to say just yet, but yeah, we definitely purposely put Easter eggs like the variant logo in the book that keen Variant Nation fans will have to spot later on, and maybe some other things that we put in there.
and I think beyond that too, I think in Arris, correct me if I'm wrong, but like I feel like we like the idea, like obviously homaging the quite literal real variant, but the idea that like the premier comic book publisher in this like fictional world is Variant, as
yes.
Again, there's that cool logo and
so
good
like
brand, so we were able to have a little bit of like meta fun with that as well.
Yeah, that was really cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was one of our early conversations. So like, it's variant comics in this our Astonishing Times universe is like, the Marvel or DC of that universe.
You made it, Arris.
Yeah, I did it. Noah's reading variant comics.
All right. When you guys develop these characters like Gold Rush, Crossout, now this question is for both of you guys. When you guys were having your writers meeting and so forth, did you guys pull up any of your characters from childhood that you guys would like Frank, you said you had always been writing, and Arris, I'm sure when you're playing with action figures, you'd be like, oh man, if I could have someone else besides the Flash, I would call him this and they could do this. So did you guys bring some of those like childhood memories of your creator-owned heroes to this story?
Arris, can I jump in first to quickly bury myself here?
Yeah, sure.
So I told Arris when we started doing a superhero book, I'm like, listen, man, I can't make up superheroes. I'm so tired. I don't know if I have any I really care about. I'm all for like the archetypes and figuring it out, but I need you to carry the weight here. And I really like turned to Arris to think of a lot of the conceptual like ideas and backstories here. So Arris, why don't you tell us, because Frank was like, I'll deconstruct them once we have them out, but what are we gonna do?
For sure. Like there wasn't something that I specifically like. You hear Todd McFarlane say like he drew Spawn in like middle school and stuff like that, and he always had that character. So there wasn't something like specific like that, but definitely like there was the idea of always like, okay, if I could do Batman, make my version of Batman, what would he be? And that's kind of, falls into like that dark vigilante vibe of Koken. So in a lot of ways, like Koken is basically everything that I would want to modify or do to Batman. And then me and Frank, work together and flush it out even more. And then even like, I'm a big fan. I know a lot, it's kind of debated in the world of comic books where like people don't like overpowered characters. Like a lot of people get Superman crap because it's like he's so overpowered, he's boring. But like I'm all about that. Like I think that makes the character more interesting in the sense where it's like, okay, Superman is this all powerful like god, right? So nothing can beat him. So it forces the writers and creators to like work their way out of that mess. It's like if nothing could beat him, now you have to like think of a clever situation to where he's in a predicament, right? So with that said, creating our version of Superman Infinite was another really fun one. So definitely Koken and Infinite were inspired. We're like, okay, if I could do Batman and Superman, what would I do? And then, me and Frank came up with stuff together, and I was like, dude, going back to the whole Spirit Bomb thing, I'm like, well, I'm just going to make Infinite, like a Superman Goku mashup.
And then me coming in and waving my finger and be like, we can't do just that, blah, blah, blah. And then lots of talk. But no, it is really the fun of it. And I don't mean to paint myself as so negative, but it is a real fear for me. As I said, I didn't want to do a book that just felt like our own bad version of these characters.
Right.
It was very important that we came up with characters we were excited about, but then really just did the like huge deep dive over that time of talking about like, well, what do they mean? What do they say about XYZ? And again, we don't want a book that's overly thinky, but I think if you're looking for the layers there, you can slowly peel it back. And Lord knows you can always listen to us talk about it, as well as we'll have a lot of content talk about where these characters came from, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, for sure. And it's like, it's not one of those things where like it was like, I'm literally gonna just do like Superman, but his name is this name. No, it's just like, as far as, it's one of those things where it's like, if you make a character who could fly, has super strength and lasers out of his eyes, people are automatically gonna compare him to like this other big character, right? So it's like one of those things. But like, I think, you know, at face value, just being like he's the most powerful character in the universe, people might assume that. But I think once you read our book and stuff like that, he's completely different than, you know, Superman, I guess, you know what I mean? Which obviously people are naturally going to want to compare him to. But I also think it's really fun in the sense to where like we want to be in that conversation where it's like everyone likes to argue like who could win, Superman or Goku? Who would win, like Omni-Man or Superman? Where it's like I want to throw Infinite into that mix. Was like, well, who would win, Infinite or Superman? You know what I mean?
So, let's see. And then this question is for both of you guys. You know, I'm going to say because Arris, I know that you said, I think in one of your variant YouTube episodes that, you know, that you guys are going to be making episodes. And I think, Frank, you already touched upon it already, that you guys are going to go over the process of how to make a comic, you know, and you guys are showing the examples of, you know, with Astonishing Times. I'm going to ask, like, how did this come about and why? Why did you want to do this, like, do it yourself? Or how does comic books are created? How did that come about, basically?
Well, we basically wanted to, you know, we basically want to be as transparent as possible, especially with our variant audience, or our variant nation, as we call them, just because, like, you know, obviously this is our book, right? But like in a lot of ways, it's the audience's book, the variant nation's book as well, because this wouldn't have happened without them. So we just wanted to, you know, show them like what went into making a comic book, if anyone wanted to do it. So I don't think, Frank kind of touched on it earlier, where there's stuff out there we could find, like how to write comic books, how to draw comic books, but I don't think in the way that we're going to do it, in the sense of like literally follow us step by step of like how we did it. Like we're full transparency is like, you know, giving the real world origins, you know, like even in our spotlight episodes where we tell you like, oh, this is the fictional origin of Coke and like, and in the universe, but also like, why did we come up with this character? Why did this type of character need to be in our book? What goes into that? And I don't think there's, you know, a lot of stuff like that. Again, I'm sure you could find it, but not in the way we're doing it. And, you know, especially with the Variants platform, like we have a direct comic book audience, you know what I mean? So like literally this is like, it's like selling, you know, bananas to people who love bananas, you know what I mean? You know what I mean? In a sense where it's like, why would, you know, these are comic book fans, why would they, even if they don't want to write comics, wouldn't you be interested in like seeing the process, you know? So we're going to be doing, you know, deep dives like that throughout, you know, the 5-6 months of as these issues release. And it's going to be really, really cool and interesting to explain like why we did this, you know, Frank, you know, giving the theory of like, this is like all the structure you have to hit. And then I also think it's really cool because we get all the perspectives, right? Because like I'm like the noob, right, where like this is my first experience, so I can give like that outsider's, you know, first impression. Frank's done this several times, he could give like the veteran impression of like how this is done. And then our amazing artist Ruri, who's also a veteran, but he can give the artist you know, side of it. So I think we hit like everything. And then even like Lauren Affey too, our colorist, like we're gonna literally run the gamut, where I don't think it's been done like that, where like you go from your writers. Me and Frank could even talk about how we co-write, because that a lot of people have that question too, because they're like, well, you know, writing and stuff, but how do you co-write? Like that's weird, like people don't know like the inner workings of that. So explain that. Artist, coloring, and even maybe like lettering and stuff. Like, you know, the sky's the limit. So we're gonna, you know, try our best to be as transparent as possible.
Sorry, saw my size on my one. Sorry.
Oh, no worries. Yeah, and it's one of the things that really excited me about this opportunity when Arris first came to me. As he said, his brother-in-law Ryan runs Film Riot, and one of Film Riot's big components is showing a lot about practical filmmaking and being like, oh, this is how you actually like make certain effects or do certain things. And I think YouTube in general has been a really amazing resource, like without being too grandiose, like for humanity. Like I can be like, how do I fix my sink? And I can see a video of 20 different people fixing their sink. And for me, that was exciting because again, I still teach when I can, and I'm very passionate about giving people the tools to write, because I think writing is really miscategorized as like some just like special blessed skill you have to have, like when there are practical resources and tools you can use to tell your own stories, which I think is so important. And it's just something I'm really passionate and excited about, and having the platform to do it, as well as our own like hopefully good example. Like, look, we made our book, we think it works, and hopefully you enjoy it. And like we have nothing to hide. Here's exactly how we did it, because if you have an idea you're passionate about, you can do it too. And that sounds so like on a home gardening channel show about it, but it is just something that I think is information that I'm so glad to get out there in like a frankly like free platform, and just spread the good word in a way of like, hey, like this is not as inaccessible as you think, and here's like a really nice resource. And also, like Eric said, hopefully a little bit of the human interest story too, of like, oh, like, well, this is how we did it. And at the end of the day, like really just a way to embrace that community that I normally don't have, where it's like, oh, like normally this is a very quiet, secretive, like in my house alone process, but we're so glad to be transparent and bring people into it, because we think it's something that is at its core just like fun and exciting, beyond hopefully educational, and maybe we'll lead some people to make their own books, which would be just beyond touching, of like, oh look, let us pay it forward a little bit.
Because I was gonna say, just listening to you guys, Frank and Arris, just listening to you guys talk about how you guys came up with Astonishing Times is great, because it's basically back in grade school. Hey, let's make our own comics. Arris, you have your ideas. Frank, you've seen how the comics books industry work, and it's a perfect balance, because Frank, like because again, you guys had this, like Arris, you had this great passion to write comics. You reignited Frank's passion for comics again, because Frank, you still had that passion for it. What's really nice is that also too, Frank, was like you said, and I love the word, strategically knew where to go, to how to get this comic made. And what's really great too, I really like it, is that you guys are also going to show here, this is what we went through. We're going to show this to you guys, because I'm going to say, hopefully this happens, but who knows, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, Frank at a convention, or Arris probably when when you're still doing your YouTube channel, you guys are going to hear a fan go, I made this comic, it's being published by Comixology or a publisher. It's all because of you guys, because I saw how you guys did this.
Would truly
that would be
the best.
Yeah.
The last thing I will say on that is, truly, like, it is an idea of paying it forward, because like I started trying to figure out how to get into comics probably around like 2004, and I had no clue. And I was just like, I guess you have to work for Marvel, right? And I like wrote like letters of inquiry to like Marvel and DC that probably were immediately thrown in the garbage. Like I just had no clue, and there was just so little resources. And thankfully, like again, I started going to conventions and just walked up to people who were so kind to like talk to me about it. And actually, like, I would hand them my like bat samples, and they would actually look at them and give me feedback. And that honestly meant the world to me. And honestly, like, some of those people I ended up eventually co-writing with at Marvel or DC. And I don't even know if they remembered. I was like, man, when I was like 18, I handed you a bad pitch at a convention, and you were nice enough to talk to me. And now here we are. And truly, like I said, I think that speaks to the fact that the medium still is so accessible. And that is, I know so many other pros who have that story. But also, like, I'm very cognizant of the fact, like, not everyone wants to go to a convention and talk to people face to face. And I don't want people to think like, oh, well, because I'm not a huge like social networking person, like not social networking, but a social networking type person, I can't get in. Nothing would make me happier than to give introverted people who want to stay home their own tools and feel just as accessible. Because while I do love that comics, again, there are cons, you can go to them, I don't want anyone to feel left out, because as I said, comics is so wide open now with web comics, digital publishing.
Yes.
I just want to give people the tools they need as an educator. Like, there's my still can't kick that out of me of like, oh, like I want to provide. And as I said, and just so thankful for the people who have been kind enough to me and taken their time. Blah, blah, blah. I could go on that forever, but truly, like I said, I'm so glad I can be part of this book as well.
Arris, do you want to add anything to that?
Dude, I mean, going off that, if I ever heard that one day, that would be like one of the greatest honors ever, man. Just to know that you inspired someone to do their dream. I mean, like, there's few things that are better than that, right? That's one of the most humbling things. So now I hope that happens one day.
I'm gonna say, I'm gonna say, I hope and I'm not trying to be sarcastic or condescending or anything, but I really hope that a comic book fan right now, in their teens and so forth, they do come up to you years from now to say thank you,
Yeah, that'd be humbling, because it's funny too, because like, as far as like from where I started, because again, like, it's just weird, because it's like, I love comic books and I was always a fan, and I always wanted to do it, but it was one of those things where it's like, you hear people say it was almost kind of like right place, right time thing, where like I was just fortunate enough for like things that pan out the way they did. Yeah. So like, if I could, be any type of spark for someone else to lead them down that path that eventually, for XY reasons, leads them into comic book success. I mean, again, that's amazing. I think that would be another full circle moment right there.
Okay, so I know we talked a lot about it, but I'm just gonna ask this one last question before I start going into the fun questions. Any last words about Astonishing Times?
It comes out July 27th. You can pre-order it now on comixology.com, and then it'll download overnight and be available on your computer, tablet, or smartphone in the morning. And it's gonna be a monthly book. We basically, Frank kind of said it earlier, that this is kind of our love letter to the superhero genre. So everything that we love, Rory loves, like everyone who had a hand in making this book with us loves is in there, right? And I hope that if your taste aligns with ours, I think you'll really, really dig this book. And it's a traditional superhero book, but not. I think we brought a lot. Hopefully, I think we brought a lot of new elements and things to it that'll definitely make it, feel like something new and fresh. As it's. The last thing I will say is, the book, even if you watch the teaser trailer and everything, it's not what it seems it is. I'll leave it with that. It's not what it seems.
Okay.
I will laugh that I already see some people like, oh, this is just gonna be X, Y, or Z, but I echo Arris. Like, no. Like, there are genre elements in here, but we are very aware and really wanted to, beyond all the like highfalutin stuff that I will say, and we really want to create a good story that people can really love. So we hope you'll give it a shot.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to ask two fun questions, and then I'm going to start closing up. All right, we already talked about this before we started the interview, but I'm going to ask this question again. Have you guys been to Hawaii?
Have not. It's a dream of mine. I think if I surprised my wife and went to Hawaii, I would be the #1 husband in the world to her. So it's definitely gonna happen one day. Hopefully soon here, because man, it's beautiful out there. The people seem incredibly nice. So I want to do it. I want to go very bad.
Same boat. Have not been, but very much want to do it. I'm not much of a traveler minus like a few locations, one of which was Japan, which I managed to get to a few years back. And now Hawaii is one of the only other tropical like places I'm interested in because it just looks so dang pretty. And now we know you, Jason. So
now exactly.
yeah,
We'll
so
have to
now,
visit.
Now we have a friend there.
We'll come knocking on your front door. Hey, you got an extra bed?
Yeah. Let's see. Do you guys want to give a shout out to any of your LCSs?
Yeah, I'll give one. I got Keith Comics here in Garland, Texas. That's my local comic book shop. It's funny. It's like 25 minutes from me, but that's my local shop. Because again, comic shops aren't as commonplace as they were in the 90s. But we have a few down here. So Keith Comics, which is actually a chain. There's one in Garland, Firewheel, Texas. I love that one. And then also, what is it? More Fun Comics and Games, which is another one out here. Pretty big shop. So if you guys are in the Dallas-Fort Worth area and you're looking for a comic book shop, those would be my two recommends.
There are so many, and I know I'm going to say a few, and I'm going to feel
That's
awful because there's going to be like 10 others. Local, I'm actually in Austin now. There's Austin Comics and Books, who are fantastic, and then also Dragon's Lair, which is a gaming shop, but also has an amazingly well-curated comic section. But then also just have to shout out my friend runs a shop called Superscript Comics and Games in Ohio, in Cleveland area. Fantastic store run by great people. Then in Annapolis, Maryland, and a few other places, there's Third Eye Comics, who have just been beyond a supporter of my career. Like, honestly, like, I feel like if every state had a Third Eye in it, everyone would read comics. And as I said, I am so passionate about supporting comics retail as they are the lifeblood of kind of everything we do. No one would actually read the books for the most part if they weren't out there. So definitely, if you follow me on Twitter or anything like that, I will always be retweeting comic shops and where to find them and cool ones. Is there's so many people out there who are opening shops. And like I said, New World Manga in Livingston, New Jersey was my local comic shop for a long time, and still in business, still doing great. And if you're in New Jersey, check them out. And
that's pretty impressive, because we're looking almost 30 years?
They've been there a long time now. Yeah, it makes me feel old thinking that, but it is probably at least 20 at this point.
Okay.
Yeah, so
that's great. No, thank you very much. So Frank and Arris, I wish you guys all the success for this series. And mahalo. Thank you guys for your time.
Thank you, man. Thank you for taking your time out to do this for us. Yeah,
we greatly appreciate it. And again, getting the word out organically is how we like to do it. And thank you. If I can adopt and say mahalo to you as well,
yes, mahalo.
Thank you. But like I said, Frank and Arris, like I said, what's the cool thing about this? Just talking to you guys is just to hear your passion about comics, to celebrate comics. That's the cool thing. That's the cool thing, I love about this interview. So again, thank you very much, guys. Thank you for your time. And, again, thank you for giving me the opportunity to interview you guys. Thank you very much.
No, thank you so much. It's again, so it reminds me why I love doing this. So thank you.
No, thank you.
Yes, thank you so much.
Now, if you are a new listener or a new reader to comics, or a lifelong comic book fan, please check out Astonishing Times #1. As Arris has mentioned, it comes out digitally on July 27th on Comixology. The first issue is $2.99 for a 34-page comic book, and that's very rare nowadays. So if you guys get a chance, please check that out. I want to give a big mahalo to Pam for setting up this interview. Pamela, thank you very much. And I want to thank Drew, the co-host for Comics for Fun and Profit, for putting this episode together, and for Drew, thank you for all your hard work behind the scenes, And if you are a new listener to Comics for Fun and Profit, please check out new episodes of the Comics for Fun and Profit podcast that comes out every Saturday. I want to thank you, the listeners. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you for listening to this episode. Until next time, guys, aloha.
Aloha.
Aloha. Awesome. Thank you so much, man.